introduce Maimi and Shirley. When we do this kind of conference, we kind of mix the themes. We try to bring different stuff, like something like in management stuff as we had in the morning, but a trend as well. Even if it's not your practice area, for sure it's gonna be interesting. So I'm pretty sure we are talking about cryptocurrency and NFTs and retail, protecting your brand with trademarks. I'm anxious to hear about that. So I'll introduce Maime Donoghue. She counsels clients on securities, law matters, capital markets transactions, mergers and acquisitions, and corporate governance issues. She's also a member of the firm's blockchain working group, the associate editor of the Blockchain Legal Resource blog, and a TED Talk speaker. That's nice.
You made me sound now I got to live up to that. So the pressure's on.
And she will, and she will.
That's great. And Shirley handles a broad range of intellectual property matters in the retail and consumer products, fashion and entertainment industries. Shirley was shortlisted as an IP Rising Star in Managing IP's Women in Business Law Awards Americas 2022. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Selected as a Rising Star for Intellectual Property Litigation Law by the New York Times Magazine. Wow. 2017 to 2022. Wow. And recognized as a Rising Star in Entertainment and Sports by New York Super Lawyers 2017 to 2018. Thank you very much. They are joining us from New York and Richmond. And it's great. The great part of the pandemic is that we realize that it's possible to have hybrid meetings. So grateful to be here with you. And let's get started.
All right. Well, that introduction was very generous, and we are excited to be with you all. I think, so our talk today is going to be an hour, and we're going to cover, some basics about crypto and NFTs, but really dive into IP related issues. One of the reasons for that is because as we've seen it at Hunton, the IP side of our legal practice is actually one of the first and most active in terms of touching the crypto and NFT space right now, because as ideas bubble up and companies start to think of all the different ways they can leverage this technology, the first thing they want to do is protect it, right? And also they're faced with some threats and bad actors in the market as well. So our IP team is one of our busiest with respect to crypto and NFTs. So we thought it would be a good place to start for you guys. I will say too, that even though we're not in the room with you, this all goes way better if you ask questions and stop us and ask us to clarify. I would really love for this to be as interactive as possible, despite the fact that we are not sitting physically in this space with you. So I've heard that you are a lively and energetic bunch. So just like we have to live up to our intros, you guys have to live up to that too and get engaged with us. So thank you for that in advance. All right, here we go. So let's see here. You may have seen the title of this presentation and thought to yourself, oh my gosh, not another crypto headline. Like, what is this fad? I have to hear about this again. It's all over the news. And I promise you that we will try and stay away from hyperbole and actually give you the real talk about what's going on in the markets. This is a brief overview of what we're going to cover. But as I said, I think the best case scenario here is that we have more of a conversation to the extent possible. So feel free to jump in and scream at us, wave your hands, and we'll stop and make sure that we get your questions answered. All right. I also just want to start by saying that I come to this space mostly from the finance and security side. And so I think about crypto and NFTs, from kind of the financial market space. Shirley is our IP expert when it comes to this stuff. And so I'm here as part foil and part sort of, just general market context. Shirley is going to be our IP expert and will guide us through all the intricacies and things we have to think about in terms of issue spotting in that legal space. So I promise you will hear from our highly award-winning IP expert in just a second.
Yeah.
So NFTs and crypto have certainly taken over headlines, and despite the recent market dip, in March of this year, the crypto markets were over $2 trillion. They're about $1.25 trillion right now, because all the markets obviously have taken a hit, but that's still a substantial amount of money that's being invested in the space. And, whenever I start out and talk about this with folks, I just really can anyone in the room define what the internet is? No? If you type in a Google search, the internet this is a literal screenshot of what pops up, right? So if we think about all the technologies that we use in our life that we really have no idea what they are or how they work, but we're entirely dependent on them, that's really how we need to start thinking about blockchain technology. Because, we've got a lot of people investing in it and experts in the market saying things like, what the internet did for communications, blockchain will do for trusted transactions. So at a very basic level, we are comfortable using technology that we don't really understand because we understand the possibility of its uses more than we understand kind of the X's and O's and ones and zeros of how the software works. And that's okay. And that's good because we can't all understand, about a series of tubes in Maryland. At a very basic level, though, blockchain just gives us the ability to transact in digital assets in a peer-to-peer network using the internet in a way that's protected by cryptography, which protects identity, proves identity, and then is also immutable because of the way the cryptography and the algorithms protect the information. I could explain to you how that works, but that would also take our full hour. So if you are interested in that, just give me a call afterwards and we can talk through it. Cryptocurrency is one use of blockchain technology. So digital currency, digital store of value being traded and transacted using blockchain technology as the underlying software for that. Bitcoin is an example of a cryptocurrency. But the definition of cryptocurrency is also not entirely settled. And we see that popping up all over the world. In America, for example, we've got the federal government trying to figure out which agency should regulate cryptocurrency and digital assets because the characteristics of the digital asset itself matter a lot more than what we name it, right? So I could call something a cryptocurrency, but it could very well be a security, right? And so we need to just think more about what we're talking about, not what we name it. A stable coin, you might have heard of that too, is a type of cryptocurrency that's being used. It's being pegged to the value of a different asset class. So typically a US dollar or gold or some sort of commodity. That's an attempt to kind of stabilize some of the fluctuation and the variance in the value. When we think about another type of use for blockchain, we come up with a digital token. So that's really just a digital representation of really anything, right? It could be a digital representation of a real world asset, or in the case of NFTs, it's a digital representation of a digital asset. So an image or an art or some sort of online digital, asset class like that. Digital tokens have been used since the beginning of blockchain in a lot of ways outside of the NFT space. So one of the first movers in this space was Walmart in their attempt to really streamline their supply chain using blockchain and digital tokens to, track the movement of their products around the world. Non-fungible tokens, right, have kind of become the media headline around what a digital token can be. And the real concept here is just that it's a token that represents a unique digital asset. And so the difference is if I copy and paste an image to you and email it to you, you could then copy and paste that and email it to any number of people, right? If I transfer using a blockchain transaction, if I transfer ownership of an NFT to you, what you're getting is a digital file that is unique based on the computer code that built it. It's not replicable, and it proves that you are the owner, the original owner of that asset. So let's say I buy an NFT online. Any number of people could certainly copy and paste it just as I have here with these NFTs right here, right? But the difference is I'm not the owner of these. The owner of these can verify that they're the owner because they own the digital file that represents the source code for that image. And that's really where the value is. The value of an NFT is that it's a non-fungible, non-replicable, verifiable certificate of ownership for a digital file. And that's pretty groundbreaking. Because if we think about all the different ways we share digital files, whether it be streaming music or exchanging photos or stealing photos from websites, right? Just like I have here. There really hasn't been a way prior to blockchain and NFTs to give credit to the owner and to source the owner and the source of that digital art and digital file. So that's really where the unique spin is here with respect to blockchain. Smart
Can I ask a
contracts.
question?
Oh yeah,
Can
go
I-
for it.
I don't get this at all, because what's the value? Who cares if I can prove that I'm the owner? That's a silly question, but I mean,
It's like buying art, right? So like I could own the original Matisse or I could own the print of the Matisse, right? And when I buy the original Matisse at Sotheby's, I'm paying millions of dollars. If I screenshot a picture of it, blow it up and put it on my wall, that was free, but I don't own the Matisse, right? And so it's really about kind of the status of ownership of the original art, which right now is sort of feeling like a weird sort of like, you know, lifestyles of the rich and famous trend, you know, rich people buying NFTs and putting it on their profile pictures. But when we think about kind of how early we are in this technology and how very baby we are in terms of understanding its power and its use, and we kind of think about all the different ways this can evolve. For example, if I'm a company that sells, if I'm a 3D printing company, for example, and I want to send to someone a file that's a unique digital file that is a one-time use on how to print this digital, how to print this one little piece of a car. I've got the hardware of the 3D printer. I'm the company, and the company sends me that digital file. It's verifiable. It's an NFT essentially. It's a non-fungible token of that file. It's a one-time use file, and it allows that company to send me a part online essentially that I then print in my warehouse or my, you know, wherever I'm producing the part. So there are all sorts of ways that we can really expand the scope of how we're using NFTs. We're not there yet. And so we're really in the baby stages. I mean, think back to when, you know, Amazon was literally a bookstore and pets.com was supposed to be like the big website, right? That was going to be the craze of the internet boom. I mean, we've evolved since then and we'll evolve since now, but this is where we're starting. And so the issues are very baby issues. And I think when Shirley kicks off, we'll see just how ever evolving and sort of open the market is right now in terms of its understanding.
Maybe I also think to an extent, as you mentioned, and we'll touch upon this a bit later, I asked the same question when I first started to delve into this area of law. And I spoke to a number of crypto, so quote unquote experts and those who are involved in the area, Mamie obviously leading that group, but several others. And what I was told time and time again is that the purchase of these NFTs is a status symbol, meaning you could buy a Timex watch and it will tell time as well as, or if not better than a Rolex. So why would you spend all this extra money on a Rolex? Because of the status that comes with purchasing such an item. So the fact that you can purchase this and make it your profile picture or show that you own it in a lot of ways is exemplary of your status. And a lot of people like to show it off and make sure that others know that they've in fact purchased the actual NFT rather than copied and pasted an image.
Yeah, I mean, there's right now, not to go down too far down this path, but people walk around with, you know, gold chains of a QR code now, not even an image, but a QR code that proves that they're the owner of the NFT on the other side of it, right? So it's, I mean, it's a little bit wild, and obviously this kind of like fanfare around NFTs is certainly not sustainable, but it's sort of the first kind of, you know, widespread use of a technology that really could change the way we transact in digital assets, period. But right now it's very much, as Shirley said, about the status. Like these things right here are called CryptoPunks, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. But in February, someone bought one for $23.7 million. So, you know, certainly a little bit of a bubble. There's just one more thing to add here, and this is, I know I'm talking to a room full of lawyers. So when we talk about smart contracts, we're not talking about a legal contract with offer, acceptance, and consideration. We're talking about computer code that's really an if-then phrase. And so when we talk about smart contracts running these NFTs, what we're really just talking about is the code that says, if I send you this money, then you transfer ownership of the NFT to me. Right? And all the different sort of if-thens that have to happen along the road there. So we're not out of a job. There are still real contracts for us to worry about. This is just the computer code given sort of a bad name, frankly. And I also just want to say that everyone is thinking about blockchain right now in a lot of different ways. And I'm certainly an evangelist. I think it's a great technology, but it's not right for every problem. And so if you've got a client that comes to you and says, hey, we're thinking about using blockchain to do X, Y, and Z, you know, take a minute and talk through with them to make sure that they've really thought through, you know, is this the right use of the technology for whatever their problem is? Okay. That's our basic overview. I don't want to bore us on the technology, but if folks have questions, I'm happy to answer them, or we can just kind of, I think when we dig into sort of the IP use cases, it'll be easier maybe to understand sort of what's going on in the market, but happy to take questions.
Do you have any questions?
Oh, I see a hand.
No, I'm just remember everybody here to put in green if anybody wants to talk.
Awesome. Okay. All right, Shirley, this is where I get confused because now we're talking about IP. So this is where I need all your help.
Well,
Can
go
a
ahead.
cryptocurrency function as a brand? Like there are companies putting out cryptocurrency. Can they protect that as a brand? What do we have to think about here in terms of crypto and branding?
So I think that's a great question. And I think a lot of companies are asking that more and more each day. And so I think as a first step, I think you need to identify what exactly is a brand and how does a trademark function and how does it work? So for a cryptocurrency or for anything to function as a trademark, you have to ask yourself two key questions. Is the cryptocurrency a type of product or service? And does the name of the cryptocurrency act as a source identifier, even if the source is unknown? So essentially you're asking yourself, does this cryptocurrency distinguish a product or service? I'm going to use a very general example, but when you look at the golden arches for McDonald's, everybody knows that those golden arches are associated with McDonald's. No matter where you are, no matter what you do, McDonald's has established that those golden arches are tied to McDonald's goods and services. So turning to cryptocurrency, assuming that cryptocurrency is a product or a service, it must signify that it comes from a specific source to function as a brand or a trademark. If it doesn't, then it's not going to serve as a trademark. Now, what does that mean? That means that the cryptocurrency has to act as a source identifier, and that when you use the term, you use it as an adjective rather than simply a noun. For example, let's make up a cryptocurrency, oval coin. If you decide to use the oval coin, instead of just describing it as oval coin when you use it in a sentence or when you use it in your daily word usage, you should add in oval coin digital currency. Now, why? Because then you're using it as an adjective that modifies a noun. An example of this would be Xerox. Xerox initially was a very strong trademark for the company. It was only after it became more generic in its use and people started using Xerox instead of copy as a noun that it started to lose its trademark protections. Several companies, for example, Band-Aid also to an extent went through this. You have to make sure that if you want to use it as a brand and as a trademark, then you must try to use it as an adjective rather than a noun whenever it is used.
Oh, sorry, I don't mean to stop you. So question. So then that means like Bitcoin would not necessarily be, because it's not Bitcoin cryptocurrency, right? It's Bitcoin, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
that's different than like when Facebook or Meta now comes out with its own digital currency called the Meta coin. They can protect that as a part of their brand because it's an adjective defining the coin, like the Meta coin, as opposed to just the coin itself.
Exactly. And my inclination is that Facebook knows enough that if they create the Meta coin, they're going to refer to it going forward as the Meta coin type of digital currency of some sort. And as you know, Facebook has now, changed its name to Meta. So it's already developed a brand under Meta. And this is just an expansion of that. It's basically going to be part of its family of marks, which also helps to establish its legitimacy as a trademark and a brand.
So when companies are coming to us and saying, hey, I'm thinking about creating a digital currency, what they name it is important right from the jump, right? So we should be helping them think through like to name it the right way to get protection.
Absolutely. Just like any other trademark, the name is significant. You want to run clearance searches to ensure that nobody else is using that name in any other categories. And then the use of the mark going forward is also going to be very significant as to whether or not the mark will remain a mark and not fall into a generic type mark, which can lose its protections.
Okay. Interesting. So we are getting, though, I mean, the USPTO is thinking through this, right? I mean, they are granting cryptocurrency trademarks and you know, they're doing this, right?
Right. So before I even get to this, I want to take a step back because I'm sure that those non-IP attorneys are probably thinking, what is the big deal if it is a brand or a trademark? What do I benefit from gaining trademark protection? Now, the real benefits of trademark protection, especially being able to register the mark, there is a prima facie evidence of validity. You get a nationwide presumption of exclusive use and priority of filing dates. In most countries, it's the first to file trademark application receives priority. In the US, it's first to use. So the priority is based on your use date, and registering the mark makes clear when you register the mark when you first used it. Therefore, you're receiving nationwide presumption of validity and exclusivity. You're allowed to display the R in the circle that you see on so many marks and so many products. You're able to bring a case in federal court, and you're able to collect statutory damages for certain infringements. With that being said, what classes do you register these marks? Typically for cryptocurrency, we've seen that the marks are registered in either class 9 for software products, class 36 for financial services, or class 42 for software services. Again, these are the general classes that we've seen it, but since it is a new category and it is still a new technology, it is possible that it will expand beyond these classes and that other classes may become relevant as time passes.
Yeah. And this is always interesting to me too, because this is really where the characteristics of the technology are more important than what we name it, right? So I could call it cryptocurrency XYZ, and really it's just a software platform. You know, I'm not really issuing a store of value cryptocurrency. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you should also bear in mind that none of these descriptions that you see on the screen right now actually cover the currency itself, because there is still dispute as to whether cryptocurrency is considered a good. So why even try to register? Because this boxes out others from trying to register the same name for another category. Therefore, if you are considering eventually creating a currency, or if you want to and you're looking to register it, it's better to register it even in another category to box out any possibility for someone else trying to pursue that name or that mark in a category.
Interesting. And I got to tell you, in dealing with some of the startups and entrepreneurs that we see on the financing side, they're not thinking about this stuff from the jump, right? And so that's why it's so important to make sure that the folks like across the practice groups of your law firm are aware of kind of the issue spotting that needs to happen here. Absolutely.
There are a number of large brands that may look to the future to create a cryptocurrency and just make up the name and then come to us asking us why they're not able to obtain a federal registration. And it's because others have already used that mark in other categories and will block any possibility for registration. That's why it's so important to do clearance, to take a look at what is registered on the USPTO prior to trying to register or coming up with a name and spending all that money on marketing.
Interesting.
Now, moving forward, the question is, how can cryptocurrency companies obtain trademark protection? As I mentioned, a lot of these companies are registering them in class 36 for financial services. They're covering services that they have a business interest in or that they're currently working in, even if they can't register the currency themselves, because they're looking forward to the day or the time when they can and they'll be able to do so with ease because they've already registered in these other classes with the mark.
Yeah, so when I love hearing you talk about the case law, Shirley, because it reminds me of the same sort of analysis that we do on the financing and security side. There's no specific cryptocurrency law, right? There's no specific NFT law. And so courts and federal agencies and government agencies are applying traditional law, traditional legal theories to this new asset class. And we've seen that unfold in some of these cases. I don't know if you want to highlight anything here, but it's always so interesting.
Absolutely. And you know, the interesting part about all this is that they're applying the law to these crypto currencies and the assets the way that they would a tangible, or, you know, they would with monetary or physical or tangible kinds of currency. They're not really reinventing the wheel here. For example, in Alibaba Group holding versus Alibaba Coin, which was in the SDNY in 2018, the Alibaba, which we are all aware is a very large, online retailer, sought a preliminary injunction against Alibaba Coin Foundation for marketing a cryptocurrency called Alibaba Coin in violation of Alibaba's trademark rights. To establish personal jurisdiction over Alibaba Coin Foundation, Alibaba presented evidence that a New York resident had purchased the Alibaba coin on at least one occasion, 2 occasions, and 3 occasions. Alibaba Coin Foundation argued that the transaction didn't occur in the US, but rather in Belarus, where the server was located. The interesting part is that the court completely dismissed this defense and compared it to a traditional financial transaction. When somebody buys something on their debit card or their credit card from an out-of-state vendor, they don't claim that the point of transaction is where the service is located. It's where the purchase is made. Similarly here, wherever the cryptocurrency was purchased is where personal jurisdiction is established. Therefore, they completely dismissed the defense and personal jurisdiction was found. And most interestingly, the court also said that even though Alibaba had repeatedly stated that it didn't intend to move into cryptocurrency, this didn't constitute an abandonment of its rights in that space, which is exactly what I was mentioning before, how even if you're not registered in a specific crypto type class, if you have the rights for the mark in a class that you're working in, then that will extend to other areas going forward. And that is something important for trademark owners who even have no intention of entering into the market, but still want to protect their mark in their specific space.
Yeah, and the personal jurisdiction piece is one that I like to highlight too. I know we've got a lot of folks in the room who practice outside of the US. And what I found from the security side is we'd folks who reach out to us and say, hey, we want to avoid the US Securities and Exchange Commission. We're just going to start our cryptocurrency project in country X where the law is more favorable, and we're not going to have to deal with it. And I have to remind them every time, well, if anyone in the US buys your cryptocurrency, if you market to US citizens, you're going to be opening yourself up to personal jurisdiction in the US. So the same rules apply on jurisdiction, just like they would for a lot of other technology and things that we see in the market. So that's also a really key practice point for you guys as you're thinking through this, and folks come to you with ideas.
Again, this is another interesting case is Telegram Messenger Inc. And in this case, the court determined that they weren't going to treat cryptocurrency and blockchain as a special category. And the fact that the plaintiff had entered into purchase agreements with a number of investors for the right to receive its cryptocurrency grams upon launch. And the defendant subsequently initiated an initial coin offering for a cryptocurrency also called gram. And they argued that Telegram didn't establish priority because it did not establish a prior use in commerce. But the court determined that the offering agreement was sufficient to establish that there was a use in commerce, similar to any kind of offering or offering agreement in, securities or any other type of financial transactions. That was sufficient to show use in commerce and that established priority in the mark, and therefore the preliminary injunction was granted.
Yeah. So again and again, we can go through this case briefly, but I just want to stress to you guys, don't be afraid when you hear cryptocurrency and blockchain and NFTs. It's not something that you can't understand, because the legal theories and the law that's being applied to this technology is the exact same that we've been working in for the rest of our careers, right? We just have to get comfortable talking about a new use case to apply the law, but it's the same legal theories.
Absolutely. And this doesn't apply to IP. Sure, some of you may be aware that they're starting to apply insider trading laws and rules to crypto. As they would any other physical currency. So this area is here to stay, and the government and individuals and companies are investing more and more in learning more and in trying to establish themselves as leaders in this field. This doesn't say that cryptocurrency doesn't come with its own set of issues. I mean, there are practical problems with any currency. With cryptocurrency especially, there is issues with the anonymity. I'm glad I got that right. The anonymity of the owners or of a cryptocurrency. For example, there was a case in the Eastern District of Virginia where the trademark owner was unable to track down the infringer because there was no personal information available. So as you know, service is usually constituted through personal service. If you can't contact someone through personal service, the judge sometimes orders publication. This poor plaintiff incurred the cost of publication and attorney's fees, and they were still unable to track down the actual defendant. So in those cases, you know, it's a lot of money upfront by the trademark owner to try and track down these people. So that's also something to keep in mind going forward.
All right, we're gonna shift the conversation and start talking about NFTs, but I want to pause and see if anyone has any questions there about just crypto and trademark law. And again, I just want to emphasize that we're using the word cryptocurrency sort of broadly, but you know, a lot of times when people are developing a cryptocurrency, it's may not legally be considered a currency under the laws of whatever jurisdiction you're in. It's just, you know, they're calling it cryptocurrency. All right.
I just wanted to make a comment because it was interesting when Shirley mentioned about it not being yet a good, but
I'm so sorry, I can't hear you. I don't know if you could.
Okay. Maybe it's good for us to know
Better.
that we need to talk closer. Yeah. So it was interesting when Shirley mentioned that it was not yet a good, but you kind of registered in other classes because you need to start with that protection, because at least in Brazil, I do a lot with M&A with multinational companies, and most of them, they registered trademarks worldwide, regardless of having a presence, because we've had situations in which, okay, somebody knows that somebody intends in the future to invest, and then somebody goes there and registers, so that there's no, and you need to complain, and you need to evidence that somebody has nothing to do with that trademark, that it was just somebody trying to gain some money. So for us, that I'm not a crypto knowledger, I mean, at all. But at least it's becoming acquainted that, okay, keep an eye open that this needs to be registered, and you need to create a name, and you need to do that most probably worldwide, or at least region-wide, because if not, you're going to lose it. And so that's really interesting. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think, you know, and we use this in trademark law all the time, I'm sure you're aware, but it's use it or lose it. So if you are thinking of a mark, if there's something term that you want to use going forward in any area, or even are using right now, then we recommend running the clearance and registering it in a class to help reinforce your rights. This isn't to say that you still, you know, you'll still have your common law rights even if you don't register, but by registering, you're establishing stronger rights. As I mentioned, the reasons before, you'll be able to obtain statutory damages, bring claims in federal court, and also you're making it clear to the rest of the world that you are indeed using this mark and it is in fact yours. You're putting people on notice.
I need to go register Mamie coin. I don't even know why I'm sitting here right now. Surely we got to talk after this.
We're going to talk. We'll talk.
All right. So we're going to dive into NFTs a little bit, and we've saved the whole second half of the conversation here to dig into this topic, because I know that it, you know, sorry, I don't know your name, but it's a great question, right? Like, what in the heck is going on here? Why has the world gone crazy? Why are we spending millions of dollars for grainy pictures of, you know, cartoon characters? And it really does get back to what Shirley said, right? It's a status symbol. And a great example of that we've seen in the market is in August of 2021, Jay-Z bought an NFT out of the the series called CryptoPunks and made it his profile picture. As things tend to do when celebrities endorse them, then the price of CryptoPunks shot up. And just literally a few months ago in February of this year, someone bought this one right here, this little purple guy, for $23.7 million, right? And so it's crazy to think about what's happening here, but it also just sort of indicates that even if this craze settles down, we're still talking about a market that has a lot of money invested in it. There's a lot of money invested in the technology, and a lot of people with, you know, little to no sort of background in investing are actually starting to invest in this asset class.
Just to cut in there, if anybody in the audience owns a CryptoPunk, please call me. I'd love to just love to know which one you own and how you're using it.
Yeah, does anyone here own an NFT? Don't be shy. I do. Anyone else? Not an expensive one. Okay, perfect. Maybe after this, you guys can go buy some. So I think, you know, the rise of NFTs also has to do with what brands are able to do with them. And surely we'll touch on this a little bit more later, but just the ability to engage with customers, to engage with a broad audience in a new and exciting way is a part of what's kicking off here. And third-party actors are getting involved in the process, right? So there's now NFT marketplaces, as the fourth bullet point shows right here. Sotheby's is actually now auctioning off NFTs and auctioned off this Bored Ape right here for $3.4 million. So there are sophisticated long-standing market participants in the art space who are getting involved here, and it's adding legitimacy to it, and it's also adding some investment and financing behind it.
But Mimi, before we move forward, why did you buy an NFT? Maybe I can understand better.
Why did I buy one? So I bought one for mostly practical reasons, which is that I do this for a living, you know, and so I wanted to make sure I understood the process and kind of what goes into buying an NFT. I did not buy an expensive one. I bought one that was cheap, but I minted it from the source, right? So there are two ways to get an NFT. You can mint, what's called minting an NFT from the actual creators, or you can buy it on a secondary market. I've done both just so I could go through that process and understand what it takes. And so I'm not like an NFT investor, right? There are people with a lot of money who are investing hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars in NFTs, sort of like you would like a, you know, my wife works in healthcare banking, and I'm always like, how are you in healthcare banking? She does IPOs for healthcare companies. People are IPOing a healthcare company before they've actually even gone to a clinical trial, right? So we don't even know if it's going to work, but the gains that can be made if one of those works is worth the bad investments you make. So most of her investors are investing, hoping for a 1 in 10 return, right? They invest in 10 companies. If one actually works, they've made their money back and then some. It's the same thing here right now. This market is so speculative, and there's such a high reward if one of these projects takes off, that if you have enough income, enough capital to burn, and you can invest in a bunch of different projects and one of them takes off, like let's say you bought one of these Bored Apes for their original price, which was probably right around $300. And now all of a sudden you're selling it for $3 million, right? I mean, that's a huge return on investment. So it's really just about the speculation of the market right now.
And when you say minting, Mamie, you mean that you purchased it from someone who actually created the NFT.
Correct.
They created the NFT, you bought it directly from them. When you did a secondary purchase, you bought it from someone who had already purchased the NFT from the minter. Correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
That's it. Yeah.
So in other words, minting means creating is the way that I've always thought about it from, you know, my perspective. You know, they've used the word minting, but it's like minting money, but here you're minting NFTs means you're creating it. You're taking the digital image, you are making it, you're adding the smart contract to it, and you're making it a digital asset to be purchased.
Correct. And it's typically
So who is the guy or man or woman that created that 8817? Because then they're the artists, right? So I would imagine whoever created that is famous, right? And so people want their Who who's that artist behind that image?
So it's actually
Yeah,
pretty
or-
interesting. The Bored Ape Yacht Club is a collection of 4 individuals, and they, for a long time, intentionally remained anonymous. I think it was last fall, someone doxed 2 of them and released their identity to the public, but the other 2 still remain anonymous. Because I randomly happened to be friends with one of them, and I will tell you that they did not think this was going to happen, right? They just made this sort of for fun and thought it was like a fun, cool art project, and like overnight, all of a sudden, they became like 100 millionaires. And so they've remained anonymous intentionally. It's not always the case, right? There are certain brands, artists, other known individuals who are gaining notoriety in the NFT space, who are obviously public and telling everyone who they are and generating these pieces of digital art. But you know, your question opened up a interesting first fun fact about NFTs that you can wow people with at cocktail parties, which is the 4 creators of the Bored Ape Yacht Club were actually anonymous until about 6 months ago. And now only 2 of them still are known. Sort of like the creator of Bitcoin. We still don't know who that is. That's a, you know, we don't know what individual or group of individuals created Bitcoin.
And from an IP perspective, as far as like the artists, these were different, the actual Bored Apes were created through artificial intelligence. While the designs may have come from artists, the actual Bored Apes were created through artificial intelligence and some random distributions. So this is actually a question that is still in the courts and hasn't been fully decided. But how is artificial intelligence, is it copyrightable? Meaning, are these apes truly copyrightable? And then the next question is, even if artificial intelligence is not copyrightable, the fact that it's been created and turned into an NFT does make it copyrightable. And therefore, the ownership then lies in the owners who have created these NFTs. And they are the ones responsible and who have the capacity to pass along any rights going forward.
Yeah. And so one of the reasons why these folks have gotten so rich, right? So like they sold 10,000 images and the original price was, you know, somewhere, depending on the price of Ethereum that day, somewhere in their equivalent of $300 to $500. The reason why these folks have gotten so rich, and this is really the technological advance of what blockchain can afford to the transaction of digital assets, or any asset really, is because every transaction is traceable and trackable using the Ethereum blockchain that they're built on. They receive a percentage royalty of every sale. So when if I own a Bored Ape and I sell it to Shirley, I think their percentage is like 3.5%. They get 3.5% of every sale. Well, if you're selling these things for $1 million, you're getting a lot of money, right? Every time one of these things changes hands. So think about that outside of like goofy apes, right? Like let's think about like actually honoring artists that we all feel more like related to. If Picasso had received a royalty, or if the estate of Picasso received a royalty every time a Picasso changed hands, or if the artist behind a piece of music actually received a royalty every time it was sampled and inserted into other songs, that was a part of the contractual designation of how it was created and given to the public. Think about how that changes the value of art and the ability of artists to actually be compensated for their work. Right. So out of an NFT space where we're like, these apes are crazy, what are we talking about? If we're really thinking about digital art as a legitimate art form, and it is, right? I haven't purchased a CD in, you know, probably over a decade, right? Every song I listen to is a digital asset. Every image I see on the New York Times is a digital image of that photography, right? I don't have it in my hand. Digital art is something that we are around all the time. But how does it change the way we value the artist if in a digital space where the internet allows us to transact in those digital files, like, you know, infinitely, if the artist actually can receive a royalty every time it happens? That's really the shift here in what blockchain can do for digital assets.
Yes, I'm sorry. I have a question. When
Yeah.
you buy an NFT in the secondary market, do you do it through like a platform, sort of like a Coinbase for NFTs? And if that happens, couldn't potentially that to happen the same that happens with cryptocurrencies in some cases, in which I can buy the cryptocurrency through the platform, but the transaction is not actually inserted into the blockchain?
Yeah, so any time that we're dealing with a blockchain based asset, I would say 9.9 times out of 10, the individual engaging in that transaction is using a third-party service provider. You can access the Bitcoin blockchain on your own without a service, right? If you have a coding background and can figure that out. But if not, and you want like a pretty user interface, you go to Coinbase and you say buy on Coinbase, just like you would on your E-Trade account. And the same thing works for NFTs. There's the primary NFT marketplace right now is called OpenSea. And you may have seen in the news recently that OpenSea actually has had a little bit of trouble recently because of coding errors in their software that allowed bad actors to come in and actually like spoof transactions and steal people's NFTs. So, one of the things that is just so important when we're talking about any of these technologies is, it's one thing to make sure you've protected your IP, but you have to make sure that you're thinking about the quality of your coding and your software. That's fundamental, because you're exactly right. The same exact thing can happen just as it has happened with cryptocurrency. A bad actor can come in, take advantage of weakness in the code of whatever third party, service provider you're using to engage in the sale. And it's not the weakness in the blockchain, it's the weakness in that third-party software that lets them come in and steal your goods, steal your crypto or your NFT.
I've got a question. Can you pass that?
All right, Shirley, what are some, I know you've seen these in the market.
I think there's another question.
Oh,
maybe.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Got it. Hi.
Hi.
It really was not a good question. First, you two are much better at explaining this than the NPR podcast I recently listened to. I really appreciate your presentation.
Of course.
And
Thank
I
you.
do have, and it's kind of related to thinking about the way that we think about this digital art. And I like the question about theft. I'm interested if you have any ideas about the sort of showy people who might buy this. I really liked your slide on people buying like handbags or watches or art. Sure, there are some people who buy really expensive art and just put it on the wall of their home and they enjoy it for themselves. But I think in this day and age, a lot of people really like the flash. And so thinking about the Facebook profile or the gold chain, have you seen other examples of ways that people can flash their NFT? And are there theft opportunities post transaction with this? Like once you buy it and you're holding it in wherever you might hold it, because I still don't understand. Like, what are the theft opportunities there?
Well, for example, I don't know if you know this, but Seth Green actually bought one of the Bored Apes and he was going to use it in his upcoming film. And the ape was stolen after he purchased it and transacted it, because a spoof account somehow bought it from him without him knowing, and the transaction took place and it was essentially stolen from him, resold to someone else for a significant amount of money. That third party had no idea that it was a stolen Bored Ape, and now there's going to potential litigation if the ape is not returned because Seth Green's his ape was stolen. So yes, it is possible after the NFT is purchased for there to be some sort of theft or transactional loss. And I think that that's why a lot of companies are trying to put safeguards in place so that doesn't happen again, or it doesn't happen, in the future going forward. And I'm also going to let Mamie talk more to this as well. I just wanted to address your second question, because this is something that I have a little bit more experience with as far as the status and what other ways people can use these NFTs. For example, as we're going to get into this NBA Top Shot that Mamie had touched upon, that is that's a perfect example. People on NBA Top Shot are able to buy officially licensed video highlights that then become theirs. For example, if Michael Jordan made one of his huge slam dunks or his 3-point shots that basically, won the game, and you want to buy that, that becomes yours. And that's something that you're going to show not only on obviously on your profile, on your Instagram, you're going to show it to all your friends. It's kind of like collecting, baseball cards, or, those kind of baseball cards that you did in the past. And there were, rookie ones and specially priced ones. And if you had a whole collection of them, the price went up. It's almost similar to that now with these kind of NFTs. In addition, I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, but there was a case about the Meta Birkins. And, as a female living in New York, the Birkin is the dream purse. I still have it as my goal, one day to purchase one. But what's going on right now is that somebody was selling images of the Birkins as NFTs using the Birkin logo. And now Hermes has gone after him because it became such a hot NFT. Women everywhere wanted to purchase it because they wanted to use it as a status symbol on their profiles, on their at work, like on their desktops. They used it as screensavers. There are a million different ways that people have been using these images. And I would say, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, 85% of the time it's used for the type of image or status symbol that one wants to establish. Even with and this is a friend of mine, I'm not as involved in this, but on the video game side, a lot of the time there are a lot of NFTs that are now being created and purchased. And having an NFT of one of these video game characters, it makes you almost untouchable in the gaming world. It's become a big part of Comic-Con. It's become a big part of these electronic type conventions. I don't know if that answers your question, but those are a lot of different ways that they're being used right now.
Yeah, and I'll just, the gaming example is a good one, Shirley, because another way that NFTs have really taken off, specifically in the gaming space, is if we think about, and I'm not going to talk about the metaverse with you guys, but if we think about sort of like a 3D internet reality, right, where we're gaming in virtual reality, I can buy an NFT that is my body armor. I can buy an NFT that is the weapon that I'm using or the hair color that I have, right? The NFT can become a part of my digital image when I'm represented in a virtual reality gaming situation, which I know right now feels crazy to talk about, but there is a ton of money in being invested into developing VR gaming. It's certainly something that is not going to go away. And so being able to actually carry these digital assets into a virtual reality space and physically wear that, right? That's another way that NFTs and digital art is becoming sort of a new marketplace in VR.
I got a quick question on, sorry. If you can copy this, right, then how do I know that you're the NFT owner? How's it marked or how's it shown? How do you know someone's the owner of an NFT as opposed to what they have on, they cut and pasted it and put it on their, an image on their Facebook or whatever, right? How's it distinguished that you're the owner of that NFT? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. So I can copy and paste any image, right? And put it on my profile picture. What I can't do is actually have the digital, the smart contract and the digital token in my personal crypto wallet, right? So just like the way you own cryptocurrency and your cryptocurrency is stored in your crypto wallet, your NFTs are also stored there. And so holding on to that digital certificate, that token, right, that actual digital stamp of authenticity, that's how you communicate and prove ownership, which is why people are putting QR codes on the back of their NFT chains, because the QR code takes you to the place where they actually show that they have the smart contract in their wallet.
And from a protection standpoint, if somebody is using your NFT and you have specific rights to that NFT, especially if they're using it in a commercial manner, you have the right to ask them to stop, and you can pursue legal action because of that. So having that certificate provides you with the standing to pursue these types of infringements for somebody else's unlawful use of the NFT. Does that help?
Question
That
was
answer-
my question was similar, and it actually ties to exactly what you were saying, Shirley. The whole idea of enforcement. Have there been actions to enforce? I guess the Birkin example sort of threw me off because I can go on Google, search Birkin, find a picture of a Birkin bag, make it my desktop background, and then everyone will think that I have a Birkin image. And what would the difference be in terms of why is the NFT a concern, but that's not a concern? And have there been actions by Bored Ape owners to prevent other people from making copies of their images? I mean, you had 4 on your presentation. So how much enforcement is there in this space really to kind of give the value to the asset, to having that smart contract?
So that's a very good question. So just like everything else in law, this is an evolving area, and the protections are an evolving area. The Meta Birkin case is like a case that a lot of us are watching to see how the court comes out, because it is one of those cases on the forefront. Similarly, there's another case with Nike and StockX, where StockX actually ties their they are a reseller of sneakers, and they tie their NFTs to actual sneakers with the Nike trademark. And Nike has now pursued action against them because they're saying they're using the trademark unlawfully. It's not simply just the NFT, but they're tying it to the actual shoes, using the NFT, using the Nike trademark, and therefore making it seem as they're some sort of authorized reseller when they're not. So that's also another case in the Southern District that's also pending. Now, as far as what you're saying about what I can just copy and paste an image, that also goes back to what Mamie said about, the smart contract and the actual digital certificate that are tied to these actual Birkin photos. Now, for you and me, it may not make that much sense. I completely agree. If my husband gave me a Meta Birkin and a Meta Birkin or a Birkin NFT versus the real thing, I'd tell him to get lost. But for a lot of people, having these Birkin image NFTs, which they thought when purchasing likely was connected to having a real Birkin, meaning not that they would obtain a real Birkin, but that this was tied to Hermes, would further perpetuate the images in their head that it's a status symbol. So rather than them going on, and it's almost the same as if you go in and buy an actual Birkin versus going and buying one on Canal Street. So if you go and you cut and paste an image from Google, that's like going to Canal versus, in most people's eyes, buying this Meta Birkin from this vendor. That's where the differences lie, and that's why they were making the money they were making, because these people were seen as, the preeminent minters of the Birkin NFT. Unfortunately, they were not authorized by Hermes to be doing this, and now they're being sued for trademark infringement.
Yeah, and I think, Shirley, your example about a fake bag versus a real bag, right? That's it, right? I am certain that there are young finance bros in Miami lying at night, telling people and showing a picture of a Bored Ape, being like, oh, see, I own this. This is mine, to like try and hit it off with some girl, right? And they are not the owner of that Bored Ape. And when that girl goes home with them to their 1-bedroom apartment, they're going to realize that they're not the owner of that Bored Ape, right? But like, at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is like proving, like, if you have the flex, if you have the cash to buy one of these things, it's going to be pretty apparent that you have the cash to buy one of these things. And if you're lying about it, it's probably going to be pretty apparent that you're lying about it. And if I really wanted to prove it, I could ask you to show me your digital wallet, right? But it's the same thing as carrying around a fake bag, really.
Yeah.
I know we have like literally 60 seconds left, but I just want to make sure that we end with just a high level moment where we say, okay, we've talked about copyright infringement, but let's also understand that some of these NFT projects are transferring certain rights to the owners who purchase their NFTs. So for example, Snoop Dogg has purchased a bunch of Bored Apes. He's named this one Dr. Bombay. On Snoop Dogg's clothing website, he is selling all of this clothing with the image of his Bored Ape on it because he has the right to do that based on the smart contract and the agreement between the creators and the owners. And he's now starting a restaurant themed after his Bored Ape. So whenever we're thinking about this work, and Shirley, you can really hammer this home, the contract that actually defines the relationship between the artist and the purchaser is very important, because what happens if I don't say that you have the right to do this? What's the what's the default law in terms of copyright? You know, what happens if I do say, what do I have to say to make sure that you have the rights to use something that I'm giving you?
Absolutely. And that's a really important question. 9 times out of 10, especially if it's not set out in an agreement, the copyrights stick with the seller, meaning whoever has created the NFT, the minter or the creator, is going to retain all of the copyright in the NFT. So if you want to commercially use your NFT, you will need to negotiate for that and contract for that separately. Mamie has referred to the smart contract a number of times. When I first delved into this area of law, I thought the smart contract was basically a contract online that laid out these rights. The smart contract is computer code. For those of us like you and me, maybe some of you in the audience do, computer code is basically a foreign language to me. If you want to contract for certain rights, you will need to set forth an additional agreement where those rights are set forth, transferring any copyrights, transferring, commercial rights to basically create a restaurant if you want, or put it on a t-shirt and sell it. If you have any plans to commercialize the NFT, you will need to contract for that separately.
Yeah, so Snoop Dogg can't start a restaurant that's called the Bored Ape Yacht Club restaurant, right? Because he doesn't have the right to use that mark, but he does have the right to use the mark of the NFT that he owns.
Absolutely.
And other brands have done this. 11 nightclub in Miami actually has purchased a Bored Ape and now uses it as a part of their logo. So it's not just a one-time thing.
So as lawyers, are we the ones writing the smart contracts too, or are we the ones advising as to what goes into the smart contract that some coder then writes? How does that?
So what I've noticed is a lot of the time we're either advising what goes into the smart contract for a coder, or the smart contract, the NFT is already created. And therefore, if there's any transfer or sale, we've put into place an agreement or terms of service or terms of use that sets forth exactly what happens if this NFT is sold. Like, for example, OpenSea, there's a smart contract, and then there's also a terms of service or a listing agreement, which discusses the specific terms for that NFT, which you should pay close attention to, because those specific terms that us as attorneys are most interested in are those are where the terms are located. And a lot of the time, if you have a company or a client that comes to you and says, hey, I'm interested in selling this NFT, what do I need to know? What do I need to put into my agreement? Now you'll know not only to look at the smart contract, but perhaps you will need, since this is a newer area of law, you will need to develop some sort of minting agreement or some sort of sales agreement specifically setting forth the rights that will be transferred.
Yeah. It's a really important point. And I also will say, though, that it's not necessary for us as attorneys to be able to write the code, but we have to be able to ask the right questions about how the code is written and issue spot around that. So as an example, I'm helping a company right now who's creating a digital presence in the metaverse. And they're a company that sells things. And if you show up on the first day that they open their digital store in the metaverse, you receive an NFT that's a one-time use NFT that's non-transferable, right? So that when you then come back to the store, you get a discount of some sort. But importantly, we wanted to make sure that those NFTs that those folks got were non-transferable. So there's no risk that this turns into a securities issue or any sort of investment opportunity, right? It's literally a one-time use digital token. That one, it was really important that the code for that smart contract was written specifically to prevent any sort of future transfer of that digital asset.
And Mamie and Shirley, please tell us if you have some more minutes with us, because I think we have one more question.
I'll stay with
we
you guys.
we can
Although
stay here forever.
I saw
Yeah,
on your
so
agenda
cool.
that this is your energy break, though, so I don't want to infringe on that, but
Yeah.
I'm happy to chat for as long as you guys would like.
Well, I think this is a quick question, and I'm okay if everyone else wants to leave. And I just wondered if there are malpractice considerations that people are already talking about, because just in this Snoop Dogg example, I see lawyers advising on the smart contract, which I think I understand is code and not a real contract. And then I also wonder, If the NFT creator's lawyer on just the regular contract, the agreement, is at any risk for giving up the right to that NFT and allowing Snoop Dogg to have a clothing line and a restaurant and everything, like, is that considered ineffective assistance of counsel? So are we thinking about that?
I think that's definitely a concern. And I think that, why as attorneys for either the minter or the purchaser, we need to be well aware of the terms. And that's why a lot of the time I know the smart contract is obviously very relevant and something that we should look at first and foremost. I usually advise my clients, aside from the smart contract, to enter into a general paper physical contract that sets forth the relevant terms so that we are all on the same page. I think if it's set forth in writing and not just code, and everybody has an opportunity to review it and see what your rights are being retained and what rights are being given, there's far less likely possibility for malpractice.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the same sort of malpractice that could happen anytime, right? I mean, it's not actually, executing a deal that reflects the wishes of your client and what sort of liability you might have to your client if you, create a structure that actually was counter to what they intended. Hopefully we're not doing that, but it's important to be thinking about those issues. If you want to Google a good example of that, so Jay-Z, I'm gonna get this a little bit wrong, but the general gist is that Jay-Z issued an NFT, a version of an NFT song, and the person who bid the highest and won that copy of the song was supposed to have like digital rights to some sort of, I guess they were supposed to have rights to the actual song itself when they purchased it. The problem was Damon Dash and Jay-Z didn't have the rights to sell in the first place. It was Rockefeller Records. And so now Rockefeller Records is suing Damon Dash and Jay-Z for engaging in this agreement with this third party who then bought this thing thinking they were getting the rights, but they didn't actually have the rights to give up in the first place. So the same sort of legal issues come around, right? It's just, we have to get used to thinking about them in the context of this new technology.
Thank you.
This is so very much interesting. Any other question?
I've got another, I think, just a quick question, but presumably in the way you can insure your Picasso, you can also insure your digital artwork. Has like an insurance market built up around that?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's an insurance market around it. There's a financing market around it. There are certain banks now that will take NFTs as collateral to issue you cash. Because the one thing about this is all of this is tied up in crypto, right? So if you need to leverage your crypto to get some fiat currency, some actual government issued currency, you have to sort of engage in some interesting transactions. But all of that then turns us up into a world where the sort of false safety and protection we put around art, right, is not a security because we're investing in a piece of art. How does that change then when I can fractionalize the ownership in that art or use that art as collateral for another transaction? And then when we think about the art as actually just a picture of an ape, right, that's worth a certain amount of money, how do we get comfortable around sort of the edges of where investment in an enterprise where I'm putting forth no effort but expect a return on my investment? When I buy art, am I doing that too? Well, what about digital art? What about NFTs? And so it's an interesting space, and there's more to come on that. The SEC is starting to probe a little bit in terms of what's a security and what's not in the NFT markets. But absolutely, there's insurance, there's financing, there's lending, there's any sort of financial product you can think of that would apply to a physical asset that's worth that much occurs here as well.
Sorry. So you have the NFT with the smart contract, right? The smart contract, you have all the rules that will govern the NFT, like if, when, then something. And you said that you may have like a side letter or a separate agreement when some specific terms are going to be put in there, like, I don't know, for example, you are going to receive not the property of the art embedded in the NFT ticket, but rather a license to use it, right? So how can you get sure that such separate agreement is attached to the NFT ticket, right? How can I buy an NFT ticket knowing that such NFT has a separate agreement attached, right?
So that's actually a very good question. It's actually twofold. So first of all, a lot of the time, the stuff that's what is said in the smart contract is silent. So it's not that you're contradicting what's in the smart contract, you're simply supplementing it. And you're making clear whether or not certain rights are transferred, what isn't, and what is transferred, and whether you can commercialize the NFT and what you can do with it. As far as what travels with the NFT, when you purchase it, you have the agreement with the seller, with the minter, as to what rights are transferred and what's not. When you resell that NFT, that is a completely separate transaction, and the rights that are transferred in that secondary transaction are separate and apart from what happened initially, unless it's stated somewhere that it moves along with the purchaser. In other words, when, let's say I purchase a Bored Ape from the minter, and then you come and purchase it from me. If I have a specific contract that's set forth with the minter, that may not necessarily be the same agreement that you and I enter into when you purchase the NFT with me. We will have to come to terms with our own agreement and what rights you will obtain and what rights I will retain and what rights you will gain based on what I have contracted with the prior minter or seller. Does that make sense? Now, as far as what travels with us, that's a matter of record keeping. That's something that we have to somewhat maintain as attorneys. That also goes back to the malpractice issue. We have to make sure that we have this transaction on file, and that should this NFT be resold, we're aware of what goes next. And a lot of the time that comes down to a notice provision, just like if you were to transfer rights in a license agreement.
And you can also build in those terms into the smart contract, right? So if you're a sophisticated enough creator, right? Like if I'm Gucci, I'm not out there just like making an NFT on my iPad and selling it to the world, right? Like I've gone through a process where my smart contract that I'm using includes these terms and conditions built in. And so I think that's a part of how we need to start thinking about this with folks that come to us, right? Like as you're creating that smart contract, it can include these terms, right? And in fact, the smart contract can attach an image of the terms and conditions, right? The actual written word that goes along with it, so that you can see actually what you're agreeing to. So this I'm just showing you guys this right here. This part of the screen right here, that's what the OpenSea platform looks like. If you look at like activity for a particular NFT, there's also a column that I cut off because I didn't think anyone would care, but it actually includes there the actual like 256 character code that uniquely identifies each NFT in that collection. And so if I want to have a physical contract on paper, I can actually include that identifier in that contract. And so I know I'm talking about that specific NFT, even though they're not digitally linked in any way. I will say that will not update in real time in travel, right? But it will actually call out that specific NFT in a way that is identifiable on paper.
Mame and Shirley, I think that we could stay here forever. You can see that we shortened our energy break in 15 minutes, but we need to thank you very, very much. It was really, really interesting. I wished I had 20 years again to start working with this type of thing.
It's not too late.
Yeah, it's never
not
too late.
Too late. Not too late. Thank you in the name of the audience here, and well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it. This was an honor. So thank you. And if you have any questions, Mamie will provide our contact information. I think these slides are going to be distributed, so you'll have them. But always feel free to reach out with any questions or concerns. We love talking about this stuff. We love pondering different ideas and happy to help with whatever we can.
So yeah, I've gotten a haircut, but that is me. And you can find me on our website. We're again, Shirley and I, love talking about this. So reach out to us with questions. If you want to just sort of spitball, or if someone comes to you with an interesting question, we're happy to talk about it.